What if I told you that one of the fastest, most electric players in the NHL became the guy nobody wanted? Taylor Hall wasn't just another top draft pick. He was the guy, the #1 overall pick, the face of a franchise. A player built on pure speed, skill, and highlight reel moments. From the moment he stepped into the league, it felt like he was born to be a star. But somehow, almost unbelievably, that star started bouncing from team to team. Not because he was washed, not because he couldn't play, but because for some reason, teams kept giving up on him. He led a team to the playoffs nearly by himself. He won a Hart Trophy. He scored at over a point per game pace in multiple seasons, and still, he was traded again and again and again. At one point, fans and analysts started calling him damaged goods, a player who would shine for a second, then vanish. But what if they were all wrong? Because despite every doubt, every trade, and every label, they never managed to slow him down. He just kept skating, kept producing, kept finding ways to matter. Taylor Hall didn't live up to the hype in the way people expected, but what he did might be even more impressive. He outran it. If Taylor Hall hadn't changed the way he played, his story would have ended a long time ago. But because he did, it's still going. Because let's be honest, being a #1 pick in the NHL means the pressure never goes away. You're expected to lead, to score, to carry a team, and when you don't live up to that right away, people don't wait around, they move on, they write you off. That's exactly what started to happen with Hall. He had all the tools, speed, skill, edge, but teams kept looking at him like a piece that didn't quite fit. One coach once said he was the type of player who needs the game to run through him. In other words, too much flash, not enough structure. And in a league where systems and depth win championships, that's a problem. Other #1 picks got treated like royalty. The team built everything around them. They were protected, developed, and given time. Hall didn't get that. He got traded over and over. He went from being the centerpiece in Edmonton to a rental in Arizona, from an MVP in New Jersey to a depth piece in Boston. It would have been easy to lose his edge, to stop evolving, to fade into the background like so many others before him. But he didn't. Instead, he evolved. He stopped chasing the spotlight and started focusing on winning. He became more responsible. He worked on his defense. He learned how to fit into different roles, on different lines and different systems, and that's what saved him. So how did the NHL's most unwanted MVP prove everyone wrong? Simple. He just never stopped skating. Before he ever stepped onto NHL ice, Taylor Hall had already built a resume that most players could only dream of. He wasn't just good in junior hockey, he was dominant, playing for the Windsor Spitfires in the OHLs. Hall didn't just put up big numbers. He won back-to-back Memorial Cups in 2009 and 2010, made Windsor the most feared team in Canadian junior hockey. And Hall? He was at the center of everything. In the 2008-9 season, he scored 90 points in just 63 games. The next year, he upped it again, 106 points in 57 games. He wasn't padding those stats against weak competition either. He was doing it against the best. And when it mattered most, he took it to another level. During both Memorial Cup tournaments, Hall put on a show, scoring huge goals, creating plays from nothing, and always showing up when it counted most. He was named Memorial Cup MVP twice in a row. A rare achievement that put his name beside legends before he was even drafted. But what made Hall stand out wasn't just the numbers. It was the way he played. He had speed that jumped off the screen, a wild, aggressive style. He would fly down the wing like a missile, crash the net, take a hit, bounce back up, and do it all again. Scouts said he looked like he was playing every shift like it was his last. And in junior hockey, where many kids play safe to protect their draft stock, Hall didn't care. He wanted to win more than anything. That energy caught the attention of Hockey Canada. Hall was selected to represent Team Canada at the 2010 World Junior Championships, one of the biggest stages for young players. The World Juniors are where stars are made, and Hall delivered. He finished the tournament with 6 goals and 12 points in 6 games, helping Canada to a silver medal. His intensity stood out again. Heading into the 2010 NHL draft, Hall had already built a massive spotlight around himself. But there was one player challenging him for the top spot, Tyler Seguin, a smart, smooth center from the Plymouth Whalers. Unlike Hall's chaos and speed, Seguin played a cleaner, more strategic game. He had great hands, high hockey IQ, and was seen as the more complete player. It was the classic draft day debate, fire or ice, passion or poise. For months, the hockey world argued about who should go #1. Hall had the edge in championships and high-pressure moments, while Seguin had a more polished, two-way game. Even the media split on it. One outlet called Hall a highlight machine, while another said Seguin was the future captain-type player. Scouts couldn't agree. Some loved Hall's hunger. Others worried his reckless style wouldn't hold up in the NHL. The Edmonton Oilers had the first pick. They'd finished dead last and needed help everywhere. It wasn't just about picking a good player, it was about picking a leader, a tone setter, someone who could give the fans a reason to believe again. And on June 25th, 2010, the Oilers made their choice. Taylor Hall, the kid with the speed, the edge, the fire. They wanted him to be the face of their rebuild. It was a huge moment, not just for Hall, but for the city of Edmonton. After years of decline, they were desperate for a star. They needed a spark, and Hall, just 18 years old, was handed that weight right away. The pressure was intense. Expectations were sky high. From day one, the Oilers put him on the top line. No easing in, no development year. He was thrown right into the fire. His jersey became a top seller. His face was on the season ticket ads. He was expected to score, lead, and pull a broken franchise back to life, all before he was old enough to rent a car. But if you looked at Hall's path, that kind of pressure wasn't new. Whether it was the Spitfires, Team Canada, or the NHL draft, he had always thrived when the spotlight was brightest. His game wasn't perfect, but it was electric, fast, hungry. You could feel it through the screen. Taylor Hall entered the NHL, not just as a player, but as a symbol of hope for a struggling team. And for a while, it looked like he was ready to carry it. When Taylor Hall arrived in Edmonton, the excitement was real. He was the Oilers' first overall pick in the 2010 NHL draft, the top prize in a long rebuild. He wasn't just seen as another skilled forward. He was expected to be the player who would turn the entire franchise around. But the situation he stepped into, it was broken from day one. The Oilers were coming off back-to-back last-place finishes. Their roster was thin. The goaltending was shaky. Their defense was patchy. And worst of all, nothing felt stable. In Hall's 6 seasons with Edmonton, he played under 5 different head coaches. Each one came in with a different system, different lineups, and different ideas of how to fix things. It never clicked, and Hall had to adjust again and again. He was thrown into the fire immediately. No slow development path, no top-tier veterans to shelter him. Hall was placed on the top line as a teenager and told to lead. And for what it's worth, he tried. He really did. Right away, you could see what made him special. His speed was unmatched. He could change the tempo of a game with one rush. He had that fire, playing every shift like it meant something. As a rookie, he scored 22 goals in just 65 games. It wasn't record-breaking, but it was solid, especially on a team that couldn't generate much offense. But Edmonton kept losing. The rebuild dragged on, and Hall, while improving each season, was surrounded by chaos. From 2010 to 2015, the Oilers never finished higher than 24th place in the league. Most years, they were either 28th, 29th, or dead last. And while management kept telling fans to trust the process, it became clear there wasn't much of a plan at all. Through it all, Hall kept producing. In the 2013-14 season, he had a breakout year. 27 goals and 80 points in just 75 games, finishing 7th in league scoring. That same year, the Oilers were 28th in the standings. Think about that. Top 10 in league scoring, and the team still couldn't get out of the basement. Hall led the team in scoring 4 out of his 6 seasons there, but the help around him just wasn't there. Draft picks like Nail Yakupov never lived up to the hype. The team cycled through journeyman defensemen and backup-level goaltending. They brought in players, then quickly moved on. Nothing stuck, and Hall started to feel it. The constant losing, the frustration in the locker room, the weight of trying to be the guy while everything around him kept falling apart. Even worse, the injuries. Because of how he played, fast, aggressive, fearless, Hall took a beating. In his second season, he suffered a serious shoulder injury that required surgery. The next year, he tore his MCL. Then came ankle issues, groin problems, and a brutal skate-to-the-face injury during warm-ups that left him needing 30 stitches. Every time he built momentum, something knocked him back. But he never stopped pushing, never made excuses. By 2015, the fans had seen enough. Not of Hall, but of the losing, and slowly a new narrative started forming. Not from the fans directly, but from the media and management behind the scenes. Was this group of young stars, Hall, Nugent-Hopkins, Eberle, the right core, or had they been given too much too soon? Then came the moment that changed everything. The 2015 draft lottery. The Edmonton Oilers won the right to select Connor McDavid, the most hyped prospect since Sidney Crosby. A generational talent, a game changer. And just like that, the spotlight shifted. Hall was no longer the centerpiece. McDavid was the future, and that meant changes were coming. Enter Peter Chiarelli, the newly hired general manager. Known for making bold and sometimes questionable moves, Chiarelli made it clear this team would be built around McDavid. Not Hall, not the old core. Edmonton was pressing reset again. At the time, Hall was still in his prime. He had just posted 65 points and played a full 82-game season. He was healthy, he was producing, he was still the team's emotional engine, but none of that mattered. Because in Chiarelli's eyes, Hall was tied to the losing years, and that made him expendable. On June 29, 2016, it happened. The NHL world was rocked when the Oilers traded Taylor Hall to the New Jersey Devils for defenseman Adam Larsson. No prospects, no picks, 1-for-1. Fans were stunned. Analysts were speechless. It felt like the return didn't come close to matching Hall's value. Larsson was a steady, stay-at-home defender, but he wasn't a star. He didn't score. He didn't drive play. He wasn't someone you build around. The reaction was fast and loud. TSN's Bob McKenzie called it a shocking deal. Ray Ferrero went further. You don't trade a dynamic first-line winger for a mid-pairing D-man. You just don't. And just like that, Hall was out and on to the next chapter. For Hall, it was crushing. Later, he admitted, "I was upset. I was sad. I wanted to be there when things finally turned around." He'd been the face of the franchise for 6 years, fought through the worst seasons, tried to lead through it all. And when it came time to build a winner, they sent him away. To make matters worse, the very next season, the Oilers, with McDavid now leading the charge, made the playoffs for the first time in a decade. Suddenly, the narrative flipped. Maybe Hall was the problem, some suggested. Maybe they needed to clear him out to start winning. It didn't seem fair. A player who gave everything, played through pain, led the team in points year after year, now being treated like a weight the team needed to unload. A player who gave everything, played through pain, led the team year after year, now being cast aside like a piece that didn't fit the future. And when Peter Chiarelli picked up the phone that summer, he had no idea what kind of fire he had just lit. When Taylor Hall landed in New Jersey, it wasn't just a new team, it was a reset. The Oilers had just traded him away in a move that shocked the hockey world. After 6 seasons of trying to carry a broken franchise, Hall had been dealt 1-for-1 for Adam Larsson, a solid but unspectacular defenseman. The hockey community erupted. Fans were furious. Analysts couldn't believe it. "This is a disaster for Edmonton," one commentator said on live TV. "Taylor Hall is a top-line winger. Larsson's a good shutdown guy, but you don't make that trade straight up. Ever." Even those who weren't high on Hall as a franchise player admitted this felt lopsided. But for Hall, the noise didn't matter. What stung most wasn't the headlines. It was the message. He'd spent years battling through injuries and losing seasons in Edmonton. He had led the team in scoring. He had bought in. And now, the message was clear. They didn't see him as part of their future. New Jersey was different. The Devils didn't have much buzz at the time. They were a quiet team with a weak offense and a thin prospect pool. But Hall embraced it. For the first time in his career, he could just focus on playing. No franchise label, no savior expectations, just hockey. His first season was good, not great. He put up 53 points in 72 games. It wasn't MVP level, but it was steady. He was adjusting to a new system, new teammates, and a new role. But underneath it all, you could tell something was brewing. Hall was skating harder. He looked more explosive. And then in 2017 to 18, he erupted. Everything came together. Taylor Hall played the best hockey of his life. He was flying every night, dangerous on the rush, lethal on the power play, and impossible to ignore. He went on a 26-game point streak, one of the longest in the modern era. It didn't matter who the opponent was. Hall was always the best player on the ice. And he wasn't just racking up numbers, he was dragging the Devils into the playoff picture by himself. By the end of the season, Hall had 39 goals and 54 assists for 93 points in 76 games. The next closest player on the team, rookie Nico Hischier, with 52 points. That's a 41-point gap, a difference so large it's rarely seen between teammates in today's NHL. One TSN analyst put it this way: Hall didn't just carry the Devils, he was the Devils. He finished 6th in league scoring. He had more points than names like Patrick Kane, Blake Wheeler, and John Tavares that year. But the real magic was how he changed the team around him. The Devils, expected to finish near the bottom of the standings, clinched a playoff spot for the first time since 2012. It was a miracle season, and Hall was the reason. Then came the awards. In June 2018, Taylor Hall won the Hart Memorial Trophy as the NHL's most valuable player. He beat out Nathan MacKinnon and Anze Kopitar for the honor. For a kid who had been doubted, discarded, and called overrated, it was validation. On that stage in Las Vegas, holding the MVP trophy, he looked like a man who had climbed one mountain and was already eyeing the next. But what most people didn't see was what was coming next. The very next season, Hall's momentum was halted. Early in the 2018-19 campaign, he started battling pain in his left knee. He tried to play through it, but eventually had to shut it down. He was limited to just 33 games. The Devils without him collapsed. They missed the playoffs, and the same franchise that had just celebrated its MVP now had to decide, do we keep Hall long-term or start over? His contract was expiring, and the Devils were slipping backwards. They had some young talent, but the timeline didn't match Hall's prime. He was approaching 29, with major mileage on his legs, and deep down, he knew what was coming. In December 2019, Taylor Hall was traded again. this time to the Arizona Coyotes, a team on the playoff bubble, so he could keep hoping his presence could push them over the edge. It didn't. Hall played 35 regular season games in Arizona and put up 27 points, a respectable pace. But something felt off. The system didn't suit his style. The team didn't play fast. Hall was no longer the focal point, and in the playoffs, the Coyotes were overmatched. They were bounced by Colorado, and just like that, Hall was a free agent again looking for his next shot, knowing he still had more to give. But uncertainty had never stopped him before. If anything, it was where he always found a new gear. He had won an MVP 2 seasons ago, but now he was being talked about as a risk. Too many injuries, too much inconsistency, too much bounce around. Still, fans and media expected him to chase a contender, maybe sign a short-term deal with a team like Colorado, Boston, or Vegas, a place where he could fit into a winning culture and reset his value. Instead, he shocked everyone. In October 2020, Hall signed a 1-year, $8 million contract with the Buffalo Sabres, a struggling team, a confusing choice. At his press conference, Hall said he believed in the roster. He talked about playing with Jack I. Cull, about getting top-line minutes and power play time. But behind the scenes, people were puzzled. Why Buffalo? Maybe it was about the role, maybe it was about money, maybe it was about proving he could still lead. But whatever the reason, it didn't work. The 2020-21 Sabres season quickly became a disaster. The team was hit by injuries, COVID outbreaks, and a 17-game losing streak. The locker room was broken, Eichel was out, coaching changes followed, and Hall? He couldn't find the net. In 37 games, he scored just 2 goals. His confidence dipped. He looked like a version of himself that had forgotten how dominant he could be. The media turned on him. What happened to Taylor Hall? Is the MVP magic gone? Was he ever really elite? It was painful to watch. Once again, Hall was being talked about, not as a star, but as a rental. At the trade deadline, Buffalo moved him to the Boston Bruins for a second-round pick in depth forward Anders Bjork. Just 3 years after being named league MVP, Hall had been traded for spare parts. That's how far the perception had fallen, from MVP to spare part. But perception was never the full story. But the thing about Taylor Hall is he's never been one to quit. He didn't mope. He didn't make excuses. He showed up in Boston ready to work. He knew he wasn't the face of the franchise anymore. That job belonged to guys like Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, and David Pastrnak. And Hall was fine with that. He embraced the second-line role. He added speed to the lineup, gave them a new dynamic. He started scoring again, putting up 8 goals and 14 points in 16 games after joining the team. He helped Boston win a round in the playoffs. And for the first time in a long time, he looked like he was enjoying the game again. It wasn't about proving he was the best, it was about being valuable. And in Boston, he was. This wasn't the Taylor Hall of 2018. This wasn't the high-flying solo act. This was a smarter, steadier version. A player who had learned to adapt, who had taken the hits, literally and figuratively, and still found ways to matter. He may not have been the MVP anymore, but he wasn't done, not even close. And as it turned out, he still had a lot of hockey left. When Taylor Hall joined the Boston Bruins at the 2021 trade deadline, it was clear he wasn't coming in as the star. This wasn't like Edmonton, where he was the face of the franchise, or New Jersey, where everything ran through him. In Boston, that spotlight already belonged to names like Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, and David Pastrnak. Hall wasn't coming in to lead. He was coming in to help. And that's exactly what made this chapter of his career so different. Because instead of trying to prove he was still an MVP, Hall embraced the role of being a piece of something bigger. No ego, no expectations, just hockey. In his first interview after the trade, he didn't talk about stats or proving people wrong. He said he wanted to win. For someone who'd carried so much pressure earlier in his career, that was a big shift. Hall wasn't chasing individual success anymore. He was chasing something he had never tasted, real playoff success. From the moment he hit the ice in Boston, something clicked. Playing on the second line with center David Krejci, Hall looked loose, confident, energized. He wasn't being asked to drag the team or create offense every shift. He was part of a structure, and it worked. In just 16 games to close out the regular season, Hall scored 8 goals and 14 points, giving Boston's second line a jolt they hadn't had in years. The chemistry with Krejci was immediate. Hall used his speed to create space. Krejci used his vision to find him. Suddenly, Boston didn't just have one dangerous line, they had 2. But it wasn't just the numbers. Hall looked comfortable. For the first time in a while, he was playing within a system where everyone knew their role, and his was clearly defined. Second-line winger, 5-on-5 threat, power play support, a reliable, focused veteran who could tilt the ice without having to be flashy. That trust carried over into the playoffs. In the first round against the Washington Capitals, Hall scored a clutch game-tying goal in Game 2, firing a low-wrister past ELU's Sam Sonov to keep Boston alive. His play didn't always show up on the score sheet, but his presence was obvious. He created chances, pressured the puck, and drew defenders away from the top line, giving Bergeron and Marchand more space to work with. After the Bruins knocked off the Caps in 5 games, they moved on to face the Carolina Hurricanes, one of the fastest, deepest teams in the league. It was a battle. And though Boston eventually fell in 7 games, Hall was one of the few players who kept showing up every night. He played with purpose, awareness, and a calm edge that only comes from experience. Bruins captain Patrice Bergeron praised Hall's buy-in and impact, saying he gave the team a real boost and embraced his role without needing to be the top guy. That was the new Taylor Hall, and he was just getting started in that role. Not the guy flying solo, trying to do everything himself, not the player trying to prove his draft status or answer to critics. This version of Hall was smarter. He had learned to slow the game down, to think it through. Instead of skating 100 miles per hour into traffic, he'd make a subtle pass. Instead of forcing a rush, he'd cycle the puck and reset. It was a quieter kind of brilliance, and it didn't go unnoticed. In the offseason, Boston signed Hall to a 4-year, $24 million contract, a clear sign of trust. They didn't just see him as a rental anymore. They saw him as part of the core. The next season, Hall continued to thrive in his role. With Krejci returning to play overseas, he adapted again, this time alongside Charlie Coyle and other rotating line mates. And still, he delivered. His numbers weren't MVP level, but they were solid. He finished with 20 goals and 41 points in 81 games, and once again became a consistent second-line producer. More importantly, he brought stability. In a league full of stars demanding top-line minutes and power play touches, Hall had shifted into something rare, a former star who actually embraced the support role. It wasn't a demotion, it was growth. The difference between 2018 Hall and the version we saw in 2022 showed how much he had grown and that evolution wasn't done yet. The old Hall was high speed, high risk, high pressure. He was trying to prove he belonged. The new Hall was thoughtful, purposeful, less explosive maybe, but more effective. That change wasn't just on the ice, it was in the locker room too. Hall became a steady voice, a mentor to younger players like Jake DeBrusk and Trent Frederick. He stayed late at practices. He worked on the little things, tape-to-tape passes, defensive reads, line changes, the small habits that make teams better over time. One Bruins staff member said Hall had become a real pro, having done trying to chase headlines and just wanting to help the team win. And it was a mindset he'd soon carry into his next chapter. Because now, he wasn't trying to be the center of attention. He was just focused on winning his battles, shift after shift. He still had the wheels. He still had the shot. But now, he had patience. He knew when to push and when to pull back. He understood how to win. And in Boston, that mattered. During the 2022-23 season, the Bruins had one of the best regular season records in NHL history. Hall played a huge part in that. Even after being moved to the third line due to lineup depth, he didn't complain. He delivered. In the playoffs, he scored 5 goals and 8 points in 7 games, including a dominant 4-point performance in Game 4 against the Florida Panthers. It was a reminder. Taylor Hall could still take over a game when needed, but just like much of his career, the finish to that season was bittersweet. The Bruins were upset in the first round, blowing a 3-1 series lead to Florida. It was a crushing loss. Another early exit, another what if. And yet, Hall's stock didn't fall, because unlike years before, where the focus would have been on him not delivering, this time, people recognized what he brought. He had done his job, played his role, gave everything he had. He wasn't expected to be the MVP, and he wasn't treated like one. He was respected. Taylor Hall's career was never easy to define. He entered the NHL with the pressure of a #1 overall pick, a franchise savior tag strapped to his back, and a playing style that screamed flash and electricity. But as the years unfolded, the story changed. He wasn't always the top scorer. He wasn't always the face of the team. He wasn't always the guy making headlines. But he was always there, skating, adapting, surviving. After years of being tossed between teams, Edmonton, New Jersey, Arizona, Buffalo, Boston, Hall landed in Chicago in 2023. And by that time, he wasn't the player fans once debated over as the next great NHL superstar. He wasn't the MVP who once dragged an underdog Devils team into the playoffs. He was something else entirely. A veteran, a mentor, a respected presence who had been through everything the league could throw at a player and still kept showing up. The Blackhawks needed someone like that. They had just drafted Connor Bedard, the most hyped prospect since Connor McDavid. Bedard was 18 years old, stepping into a city with massive expectations. Hall had been there. He knew what that pressure felt like, and more importantly, he knew how lonely it could be. From day one, Hall embraced the role. He didn't demand top minutes. He didn't chase stats. He took Bedard under his wing, not just as a line mate, but as a guide. They shared the ice in practice, swapped stories, and Hall gave pointers not just on hockey mechanics, but on the mental game, on how to navigate media pressure, how to bounce back from rough games, how to last in a league that chews players up and spits them out. It was mentor mode, full on, and Hall never made it about himself. Hall said during a preseason interview that he just wanted to win, and that this stage of his career was about being part of something that grows. That sentiment said it all. He wasn't chasing legacy points or Hart votes. He was there to help build something, to guide a new core, to prove that a player's value isn't just measured in goals and assists, but in what they leave behind. And while injuries limited his appearances in Chicago, his influence off the ice remained strong. He stayed close with Bedard throughout the season. He worked with younger players like Lukas Reichel and Kevin Korchinski. Every team needs a leader who's been through the fire. Hall had walked through it, and he had come out the other side with scars, lessons, and perspective. Let's talk career totals. As of mid-2023, Taylor Hall has played over 800 NHL games, scored over 260 goals, and notched more than 650 points, making a real impact on every team he joined, whether it showed up in banners or not. That resume is nothing to shrug at. Yes, he didn't win a Stanley Cup. He never played in a cup final, but he did win a Hart Trophy, which only a handful of players in the league history can say. And he did it while leading a one-line team under intense pressure in a hockey market that desperately needed a hero. Yet, somehow, his name doesn't always come up in legacy conversations. Maybe it's because he moved around so much. Maybe because he didn't stay in one city long enough to carve out a statue-level reputation. Or maybe because fans expected Crosby-level dominance, and anything less felt like disappointment. But here's the truth. Taylor Hall carved out a different kind of legacy. One that didn't rely on superstardom, but on survival, evolution, and grit. He was often misunderstood. Critics said he was selfish in Edmonton, that he was overrated in New Jersey, that he was forgettable in Arizona and Buffalo, but none of those takes ever seemed to shake him. He just kept skating. He played through injuries, took the blame when teams underperformed, got traded more than most stars ever do, but never once threw a coach under the bus, never bashed a teammate, never fed the media with drama. He was a pro even when people stopped seeing him as one. One fan on Twitter captured a sentiment representative of many. Hall deserved more, but he never asked for it. He just played. In some ways, his story is the opposite of what most top picks experience. While others had franchises built around them, Hall was shipped out of town at his peak. While others were protected by media and systems, he was often the scapegoat. But through it all, he matured into one of the most respected voices in any NHL locker room, and that might be the part that endures most. Not the MVP year, not the highlight goals, but the image of a player who started his journey with hype, but finished it with humility. So what does the future hold? For Taylor Hall, the answer wasn't speculation, it was preparation. Even after a tough season, he wasn't walking away. He was still under contract, still rehabbing, still focused on returning, not chasing headlines, not reliving the past, just quietly getting ready for one more run. Because whatever comes next, one thing's for sure, he's going to handle it the same way he always has, with professionalism, with purpose, and most of all with that same skate until you drop attitude that's defined him from day one. So, was that the end? After all the trades, injuries, and reinventions, after 6 franchises, 1 MVP, and years of adapting, Taylor Hall finally landed in Chicago. He was mentoring Connor Bedard, guiding a young core, and embracing his role as a veteran leader. Then, just 10 games into the 2023-24 season, everything stopped. Hall suffered a serious knee injury that required surgery, ruling him out for the rest of the season. At age 32, with nearly 900 NHL games behind him, and a body that had taken hit after hit, the questions started swirling again. Is this it? Did Taylor Hall just play his last NHL game? But once again, like every other time before, Hall refused to let the story end there. In the offseason, he went quiet, but he didn't go away. He focused on recovery, rehab, and getting back on the ice. And by the time training camp for the 2024-25 season rolled around, Hall wasn't just skating again, he was ready to return. The Blackhawks confirmed that Hall was expected to be fully healthy. He was training, preparing, mentally locked in, no speeches, no farewell tour, just business, just hockey, exactly how he's always handled setbacks. Hall enters the 2024-25 season still under contract with Chicago, but this time, the stakes are different. He's no longer just a mentor. The Blackhawks are rebuilding with real momentum, led by Connor Bedard, Kevin Korchinski, and a growing wave of talent. And Hall? He's not just there to support them, he wants to contribute. Whether he plays on the second or third line, whether he puts up 60 points or 20, Hall's goal is clear: finish strong. And maybe, just maybe, get one last shot at the Stanley Cup. Not as a savior, not as a superstar, but as a piece that helps a young team take the next step. If he's able to stay healthy, the 2025 season could be his full circle moment. A chance to end his career on his own terms, not with a trade, not with a surgery, but with a full season of meaningful hockey. A season where he can still be fast, smart, valuable, and above all, respected. Because the truth is, Taylor Hall isn't retired. He's not reminiscing about the past. He's lacing up for another year. Maybe his last, maybe not. But until that final whistle sounds, there's still one thing you can count on. He's going to skate. Taylor Hall didn't have the career people imagined when his name was called first overall in 2010. He didn't bring a Stanley Cup to Edmonton. He didn't become the face of the league. He didn't break scoring records or rewrite history books. But what he did do, he endured. From franchise cornerstone to league MVP, to being traded like a rental, from carrying teams to being forgotten by them, from being expected to dominate to being asked to fill a quiet second-line role, Hall experienced the full spectrum of an NHL career and came out of it with something few players ever gain: respect. He played for bad teams. He played for good ones. He was the top guy. He was a support piece. He battled through multiple injuries, bounced between 6 different franchises, and never once made it about himself. He adjusted, he adapted, he survived. That's not flashy. It doesn't come with statues or ceremonies, but it matters. Because greatness isn't always measured in rings or MVPs. Sometimes it's in how a player responds when things don't go as planned, when the spotlight fades, when the narrative turns. Taylor Hall could have faded away, could have cashed out and disappeared, but instead he became something stronger. He became reliable, steady, respected. And the best part? His story isn't done yet. Hall is still skating, still competing, and still writing the final chapter on his own terms. So now we ask you, where do you rank Taylor Hall in NHL history? Was he overrated, underrated, or maybe, just maybe, he was exactly what hockey needed at the time? Let us know in the comments. And if you love stories like this, about players who didn't just survive the NHL, but changed because of it, make sure you check out our next one. It's about Börje Salming, a Swedish legend who didn't just play through pain, he redefined what it meant to be tough, brave, and proud. You don't want to miss it.